Good evening. For you people that don't know me, I'm Dennis Fleming. I'm the head of the upper school at Trinity Valley. I want to welcome tonight the students, family members of the Kramers, friends of the Kramers, fellow faculty members, alums, board members, parents. All of you are here to honor a very special person, Jerry Kramer. We're here to honor Mr. Kramer, not just for his 39 years of dedication to Trinity Valley. We're also here to honor Jerry Kramer, the man. I could describe Jerry Kramer many ways. I've been his colleague for some 30 years. I could say he was a history teacher, lower school principal, colleague of mine for 30 years, proud German American. Among other things, he is a devoted family man, devoted to his faith, a husband for some 36 years, father of 5, grandfather of 10. If I had to talk about Jerry Kramer, what makes him special, I would talk about him as a man of moral integrity. Jerry Kramer is devoted to doing what is right, not to expediency, not to what's popular, but what's best for the students of Trinity Valley and their parents to make the school what it is. Now, anybody that knows me and knows Mr. Kramer knows in our 30-year relationship, which has been very positive, we have not always agreed all the time. But what two people do? But I will tell you something that we have a common bond, a common denominator, when it comes to a sense of social justice. Jerry Kramer's one always to put what's right and proper first and foremost, to make sure everybody gets their due, and to make sure every person is treated fairly and honestly. And that's the characteristic I admire him the most. So what I want to say, Jerry, I will always value the working relationship we've had. I will value your friendship and your loyalty to me through the years. But most of all, I will value the dedication you always had to do what was right for the students of Trinity Valley and for Trinity Valley School. Tonight we honor Jerry Kramer.
Having a children's choir in the lower school and into the middle school, I think, was always a dream of Mr. Kramer's, and I'm so happy that 3 years ago we could accomplish that. We have most of our children with us tonight, and now we're going to sing for Mr. Kramer one more time the On You Stay, which was commissioned by our choir of Jill Galena, the wonderful composer, last year on the occasion of Mr. Kramer's 60th birthday.
We are gathered here tonight to bid adieu to a man we all know and love, a man of commitment, a man of dedication and loyalty, a man of moral character, and last but not least, a man of vision. When Jerry Kramer started teaching here, he never thought it would be for 39 years. But this man not only committed to stay, but also dedicated his life to education and the principles on which this school was founded: fine scholarship, constructive diversified interest, intelligent citizenship, and spiritual and moral development. Jerry came to Trinity Valley School as an idealistic 24-year-old teacher. He was committed to the principles and the vision of Stephen Cellini, the vision of a strong, fundamentally based classic education. There was a definite need in our community for an institution for children who had a thirst for knowledge and for whom academic challenges were important. We are what we are today because he was committed. He committed not to a prestigious private school with a beautiful campus and a long, rich history, but to a small, very small fledgling school housed in a dilapidated building in a seedy neighborhood on Hemphill. But it was a school with a vision. Jerry Kramer has remained loyal and constant to these educational principles. Through his wisdom, he has always been able to glean ideas from the ebb and flow of the new educational trends to enhance and strengthen our solid curriculum. The other night, Mr. Cellini told us how he had searched through his archives hoping to find some information on Jerry. He found some notes dated way back in 1968. After trying to decipher his own handwriting from a yellowed piece of paper, he did see 2 words he could read. They said, "Hire him." He knew then that Jerry would be the person to enrich Trinity Valley School. Under his guidance and direction, Jerry has helped shape this school. Jerry, you have made people believe in Trinity Valley School. Hundreds of people have donated their time and money and have entrusted us with their most prized possessions, their children. People strongly believe that this school, with its strong foundation, would flourish under the guidance and direction of great educators at its helm. Jerry, you are such an educator. You are a man of dedication, commitment, moral character, and compassion, a true advocate of children, teachers, and parents. One only has to look around at the students and see how their eyes light up when they see you. You take the time to look them in the eye and have a conversation with them. They all love you and know you have their best interest at heart. We, as teachers, know how staunchly you have supported us and respected us as true professionals. The child always comes first, second to none. But we also know that the respect you have always shown us makes us want to always do our best. You are also an advocate of our wonderful parents. You give them the same respect as you give others. Look around, Jerry. When you began, a fundamentally based classical education was the vision of the school. You have enhanced and improved that vision. It remains your vision for Trinity Valley School. You are the heart and soul of this school. Your signature style is the foundation on which we are able to soar and succeed. Your vision is your legacy, but your legacy is also the thousands of students you have impacted and helped shape during their tender developmental years. Students that even today continue to send back to this school their most prized possessions, their children. The impact of your leadership will endure forever. Jerry, we salute you. Receive a 21 hug salute from all of us. We love you, Jerry.
Good evening. Try to imagine a TVS of less than half its current size, where girls had existed for just a year and a half. As a reluctant new ninth grader, I entered this parallel universe. Mr. Cellini stalked the halls looking for messy lockers to dump. He taught us Latin and graded papers with a crayon while lying on the floor, like this kind of. There was Spanish with Mr. Saunier, who would rather wrestle than teach. Science with Mr. Test, whose main goal was to keep the guys from using acids and gas burners in inappropriate and dangerous ways. And a school full of boys who had been raised in a boys' school perhaps just a little too long. Mr. Kramer, on the other hand, seemed to have adjusted to co-ed TVS pretty well. Girls in history class just gave him the chance to embarrass more people by asking, "Do you have a boyfriend? Does he give you that warm, runny feeling inside?" You know I'm right. In between all the eccentricities and goofiness, I discovered that going to TVS was like flipping a switch in my brain. Finally, school was challenging and fun. I learned a lot, and I learned in particular that I loved history. One day during our freshman year, Mr. Kramer walked into our English class, not our history class, and said, "Your teacher's not coming back, and they found out I can teach English too, so I'm your English teacher." The way I remember it, it wasn't too many days after that before he came in and said, "We're doing a play for the rest of the semester." And drama at TVS was born right then. We had so much fun putting on Our Hearts Were Young and Gay that we had drama club 3 days a week before school, all the next year, and as an elective the year after that, all with Mr. Kramer as the sponsor. We were lucky to get to spend so much time with him outside of class, and sponsoring drama kept him focused on important things like the call from a mom saying that the boys were trying to watch the girls change costumes, or asking Penny and Stacy if he could bum a cigarette. It was a different time, wasn't it? I'm not sure we could have told you that he was actually also the lower school principal, which included grades K through 7 back then. No matter what the venue, Mr. Kramer made you want to be around him. He was funny, interesting, encouraging, and supportive. No wonder I chose him as my advisor for all 4 years. In thinking back over the years, I thought of another huge impact that Mr. Kramer has had at TVS. From the beginning, the school had a strong international flavor among the faculty. In the mid-'70s, we had our first exchange students as well. Jerry and Susie have always been welcoming and hospitable to all these students, not just the German ones. Thanks to the Kramers and Cellini's support of AFS, I had a terrific experience with my French sister, Veronique, my junior year, and I know Frank and Heather Shields are here, and they had a great AFS experience too. One of the many remarkable things about Jerry's long career is the number of children he has taught in the last 10 years, whose parents he taught in the 60s and 70s. Anyone who had ancient and medieval history with Mr. Kramer wants their child to have the same experience as my own 2 children, and roughly, by my rough count, 35 to 40 others. For better or worse, this has brought an added dimension to his class, with endless opportunities to get off track discussing what someone's mom or dad did back in the day. As if there weren't enough stories already. When I returned to TVS in the early 80s at 25 years old, the administration consisted of 5 40-something Catholic men and me. Can't you just hear Dennis Fleming saying, more than once, "You're a lot better looking than our last director of admissions," who was a bald 40-something Catholic man. I did have experience to do the job, but I look back on what was in some ways a huge risk for the school with amazement and gratitude for an incredible opportunity. Jerry, along with Pishta, Dennis, and John O'Connell, all taught me so many things along the way. Jerry, thank you for opening up the world to this 14-year-old, encouraging me to think, stand up for myself, and love learning. Thank you for being such a great friend, such a huge influence for the last 24 years. We have shared so much: graduations, weddings, babies, grandbabies, your children babysitting mine. We have shared advisees and a family group. I'll always remember the wonderful ERB conference in New York and the hair-raising trip to Austin for a workshop. We have had great times with so many wonderful teacher friends and school families. I remember once a long time ago, you said that you could think of me as a peer in your head, but I was still your student in your heart. I guess I just want to say thank you for letting me be both.
Good evening. My name is Liz Jacques O'Brien, and I would like to thank you tonight for the privilege of saying a few words about my great mentor and friend, Jerry Kramer. I met Mr. Kramer for the first time several decades ago when, on a warm summer's day, I came to Trinity Valley School for a job interview. And so began, at least for me, a wonderful friendship and learning experience that I will always treasure. Now, much has been said about this man's character, his integrity, his kindness toward students and colleagues, and his gifts as a teacher. But tonight, I would like to address 2 other aspects of his leadership: his management style and his sense of humor. For those of us who have worked for Mr. Kramer, many of us have come to know quite well the manner in which Mr. Kramer tackles the very difficult problems and decisions he faces daily. His formula for problem solving is really quite simple. Number one, summon the person that had something to do with the issue. Number two, separate the wheat from the chaff, identify the problem clearly and concisely. And number three, with laser-like focus, state the solution for the problem in 4 simple words. Now go fix it. And of course, we always did because, well, it was Mr. Kramer's way. To wit, 3 years ago, I taught a class of freshmen that were a teacher's dream class. This class was smart, hardworking, good-natured, engaged, and the students even spoke in Spanish. Always a challenge for a Spanish teacher. Yet these students had one particular flaw. They were hardened, serial party givers. Now, I'm not talking about the traditional celebrations of Day of the Dead or Cinco de Mayo. I'm not even talking about the occasional illicit box of donuts snuck into the class to celebrate someone's birthday. Oh no. These students had an excuse to had every excuse in the book to have a party. Winter solstice, the advent of spring break, a chapter test in which most everyone had received a good grade. Now, I confess that about mid-year, I developed a sinking feeling that I was losing control of the situation. Sooner or later, my boss was bound to find out about it, especially since some of my students in Spanish 2 class were also in his great history class. One day, in passing, he asked me in that tone of his, "You plan on giving any more Spanish parties?" Excuse me. My friends, my heart sank. There was only one way to interpret Mr. Kramer's remark. Enough is enough, now go fix it. I felt sick. The word was out, and I had let him down. And so, with new resolve, I marched into the classroom the next morning and put my foot down. "Don't even think about any more parties for the rest of the year," I demanded. Well, of course, as usual, this clever lot of precocious adolescents was well ahead of the curve. The wheels were already in motion for the fin del año surprise party, complete with an electric frying pan, Spanish tortillas, coffee cakes and pastries fit for a king. My Spanish 2 students even reserved the conference room, co-opting Mrs. Zimmerman's endless good nature and bringing her in on the scheme. So the day of the fin del año party arrived, and I walked into the conference room before going to class, and there were my students on their feet exclaiming, "Surprise, sorpresa." They were so pleased with themselves. But I also remember the words I said. "Oh my gosh, this is lovely, but keep your voice down for heaven's sakes. Mr. Kramer's going to hear you, and I'm going to be in some kind of trouble." "Not to worry," they said, because at the end of the conference table sat my boss, the straight-shooting Mr. Kramer, already enjoying some brunch. I looked at him as if to say, "But you told me I was the one that was supposed to fix it." And without looking up from his plate, he said rather sheepishly, "Sit down, Ms. O'Brien. I've always said if you can't beat 'em, join 'em." One summer, I read a remarkable book called How the Irish Saved Civilization by Thomas Cahill. It was a short book, but it was full of fascinating facts about that great island nation and how its inhabitants helped preserve so many religious and classical works after the fall of the Roman Empire. I decided the book would be a perfect gift for Mr. Kramer, who had taught me so much about religious history in our countless conversations over the years. And while I was well aware of his German bias, I was convinced he would enjoy this little-known hinge of history. So right before Christmas break, I went into his office and presented him with what I just knew was going to be the perfect present for him. He graciously took it, unwrapped it, thanked me very much, and then said, "How the Irish saved civilization." Now, we know not a word of that's true. I thought that was great. Now, Mr. Kramer could take a joke too, and no one sustained more teasing than he did about the Gregorian chants he often played after lunch while checking his emails and tending to his business. Yet I have to say that I love those chants. Having the good fortune of officing across the hall from him, I know those beautiful strains had a soothing effect on our hectic lives. And I shall miss those sounds and all the sounds that emanated from his perfectly immaculate office. In closing, I would like to say that when I was a young girl starting out in the working world, my mother, and Jerry knew my mother, sat me down and gave me this rather remarkable piece of advice. Oh my gosh. She said, "Dear, now that you're going to work, always be sure to call your boss, your superior." Now, I had no intention of arguing with her, but we were in the midst of the feminist movement in this country, for goodness sakes, and I just could not imagine calling any man I worked for my superior. I would always be respectful and always polite, but my superior? But then, I had not met Jerry Kramer. So to my incomparable superior and loyal friend, I just want to say thank you, and Godspeed.
Good evening. As a beginning student, Mr. Kramer, Dad, arrived to elementary school speaking only German. He learned English in school, similar to current learners in schools across the nation today. He grew up being positively influenced by teachers during his educational journey. My earliest memories are those in our mother's classroom and in our father's principal office. John, Julie, Mark, Monica, and I all spent 13 years at Trinity Valley School. I was fortunate to teach here as well, and my brother John was able to coach here too. So if you think about our family and the collective years of our lives spent in the halls of Trinity Valley School, that's well over 150 years. As I grew into a teenager, and I'm sure my siblings would agree, the idea of having our parents at school with us was not quite so exciting. As a 9th grader, I remember Mom teaching me first period, and in the next period, I had Dad. Growing up, we were never able to say we don't have any homework or I don't have a test. Some of my fondest memories of growing up were all 7 of us traveling to school together, especially my senior year when I was a senior, and John was a sophomore, and Julie was in 8th grade, and Mark was in 6th grade, and Monica was in kindergarten. Now, I know you're thinking, what a wonderful thing, everybody going to school together, until the station wagon broke down. Now, if you recall back in those days, Dad had a baby blue, I can't even tell you what year, 70-something, maybe 73, Volkswagen Beetle, which meant that all 7 of us got to go to school together. So if you can just envision Mark, poor Mark, he always had to go to the very way back, which was about 2 feet by 3 feet. That's where he sat. And Monica, she had to sit on Mom's lap, and we just all traveled to school. And on those mornings, we would hurry around quickly because we wanted to go to school because we didn't want anybody to see us all getting out that car. A little bit of peer pressure there. John, Julie, Mark, and I, and Monica, all have been to Europe with Dad and Mom and are very fortunate to have learned so much during those experiences. I remember as a young child, Dad would always say that one of his goals was to take each of us to Europe at least once. How lucky we were, and at the time we didn't even know it. Another memory as I think about my days as a student at Trinity Valley and having Dad as the principal and Mom down the hall was when in 7th grade in Mr. Wilkinson's English class, I got caught passing a note to Charles Jack, telling him all these things I liked about him. And if it were any other student, you know, their parents would never, his or her parents would never have seen that note. But I got home, and my dad pulled the note out of his pocket and proceeded to have me explain what you know what and you know who, what did all that mean? So I just remember thinking that wasn't fair, and I just went ahead and talked to him, and he was very patient with me. And after a long lecture about always being on my best behavior, because this was just the way it was going to be, basically from then on I was very careful. Now, as for growing up with 5 children, we had parents with high expectations, and we were always expected to keep our house clean, much like his office is clean. We learned from our dad that helping around the house was something you do as a member of the family, not something that you're paid to do. The only chore that my sisters and we weren't so happy about had to do with chickens, whether they were alive or recently dead. I still remember the yellow gloves I would sneak out of my mom's cabinet because I did not want to have to pluck a chicken's feather. And after a while, Dad was pretty good about letting us not have to do that and made the boys do it. Well, I have enjoyed most recently watching my children and my nieces and nephews with my parents. Going to Mimi and Poppy's is never a dull experience, and something with which we parents cannot compete. The grandchildren truly believe that Mimi cooks the best eggs ever. We cannot compete with Mimi on that. And then when they ask, recently I remember Alex was he was much smaller, and he asked me all kinds of questions about church and God, and even though I probably know all the answers, I usually default to, why don't you just call Poppy and ask him? Once Alex, he said, well, Mom, do you think that Poppy just knows God better? And I said, and I think about it now, and probably that's the most feasible answer. I recently had the opportunity to interview Dad for a paper I did on leadership in a doctoral program I'm in at UT. And when Dad spoke about his leadership style, he discussed being influenced by a 7th grade teacher and a high school teacher. And he told me all about the experiences he had as a student and how they affected the leader he has become today. I think about the education profession and the importance of meaningful, rich learning environments. And I think that he has helped to perpetuate the creation of a whole new generation of educators. It is to this end that Dad, I believe, has never stopped teaching. He told me, he said, what has been a consistent factor in my career is that I have never stopped teaching. I'm in the classroom 55 minutes a day. I never want to lose sight of what teachers experience in the classroom. Dad has invested his life in Trinity Valley School, and much of the school philosophy is an extension of his core values and beliefs. His personality, values, and strengths have contributed to his successful career in education. Dad has remained a constant at Trinity Valley School over the years and is known for his consistency. We all have grown up being Kramer's and Jerry Kramer's children. We have grown up at Trinity Valley, and it is embedded in our very beings. When I think of the power that Dad wields, it is far-reaching and oftentimes indescribable. He has encouraged teachers and students when loved ones have passed away. He has said goodbye to students whose young lives are cut short by tragedy. His actions have always made a statement for the school community looks to him for advice and friendship. I remember when I was teaching here at Trinity Valley, seeing a man waiting in the office to talk to him. The man was a former graduate from 20 years prior, and he had come to seek advice. This man and his 5-year-old son had survived a car crash that took the lives of the other members of his family. How painful and tragic. Yet the one place he finds solace and comfort is in his school leader and teacher from 2 decades prior. When I think of Gerald Kramer, the father and the teacher, I think of how he taught me and all of us to be independent thinkers that we are today. I remember a saying that hung on the bulletin board in his office for many years. It said, "Reputation is what others think about you. Character is what God and the angels know about you." Dad, I believe you're an example of a person whom reputation and character have collided, in which reputation and character have collided. I remember working with you on an invocation I made for the class of 1990, which really doesn't seem very long ago, but it was. And the words are still with me. I said, "Lord God, artisan of the universe, help us to bring to completion what you have begun in us, for our hearts are restless until they rest in you." You have completed a remarkably beautiful career. Most only can hope to attain the respect that is forever felt in the relationship they have with you. So on behalf of my brothers and sisters, I thank you for showing us leadership and love, and most importantly, for the privilege of calling you Dad.
It is written in the Old Testament, "Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to goodness will shine like the stars forever and ever." Generations of family, friends, and students would all agree with me that you have helped lead many to goodness. I cannot pay an adequate tribute and cannot easily find the words to honor someone who has shaped the destiny of a school and the lives therein for 40 years, offered wise counsel and guidance in life through times joyous and sad, given hundreds of kids their first view of the wonders of Europe, and in all of these, deepened our awareness of truth in its highest form. So tonight, I would like to share my memories of 3 places that prior to knowing you, I had never heard of. Although Paris, Rome, Florence, and a host of other great cities all are glorious, I am now recalling 3 much lesser-known sites, Wöhler, Augsburg, and Begratzbad, all in Germany. During the past few days, I opened a journal that I had not read in well over 10 years. The journal contained notes from lectures and anecdotes from our good friend Alice von Hildebrand, impressions of various places that we had visited in Germany and Italy for 4 weeks in the summer of 1996. I never was one for keeping a journal or for even taking photographs while traveling. But before we left on this trip, Susie insisted that I write down a record of our travels that summer. Her advice proved invaluable, and those 4 weeks remain in my memory as one of the best times of my life. On the last day of this trip, I wandered around Darmstadt getting very lost looking for a music store. I finally found one which was just about to close, but the kind owner allowed me all the time I needed when she learned that I was a Texan who played Beethoven sonatas. Somehow, I found my way back to our hotel later that night. We had a very late dinner, and I'm still not sure how I found my way back. And late that night, probably about midnight, I wrote on the last page of this journal that I mentioned, without any explanation or anything else, the names of these 3 towns, Wöhler, Augsburg, and Begratzbad. Why these 3? Because they were unique and because they bear your inevitable influence. I recall early morning walks that I took in the beautiful green fields of Wöhler outside of Hildesheim. We must have had very busy plans for later in the day, as I am definitely not a morning person. Somehow, during these quiet and solitary walks, I absorbed a unique and vital lesson in regards to the German respect for the land and the lives it had sustained for centuries. Coming upon a simple crucifix on a hill overlooking the fields, I felt in my blood the faith and reverence of generations of European families, faith and reverence that in centuries before had blossomed into a great civilization. At some other point during our month of travel, we arrived in Begratzbad, on the border of Germany and Austria, after a day exploring the Bavarian Alps. At the seminary there, we were just in time for evening vespers, sung by a small group of seminarians and local guests. I know that we have been deeply moved by some of the great choirs and cathedrals throughout Western Europe, but the Latin chant of that late June evening still resonates in my memory 11 years later. By the time we arrived in Augsburg on a Sunday afternoon, I felt I knew personally the inimitable Father Schneider through your colorful stories. He had been one of your teachers at St. Mary's High School in Fredericksburg and later would marry you and Susie. Many years before, when Father Schneider had left Texas and returned to Germany to live out his final years, he told you that he would be buried in Augsburg. If you ever got there, he asked you to remember him by sprinkling holy water on his grave. After quite a bit of searching, we finally did locate his grave, and to this day, it is a mystery to me that on a nearby hillside, there was a small building that was probably a caretaker's shed. You asked me to investigate, and there seemed to be nothing but a room of broken tombstones and gardening tools. I was just about to leave when I noticed a vessel of some kind in the far corner of the room containing holy water. It seemed as if it had been waiting for us all this time. And Jerry, I can still see in front of me the inscription on Father Schneider's gravestone, Sein Leben war Gute, his life was goodness. There's a very old movie I love called The Keys of the Kingdom, in which Gregory Peck portrays a Scottish priest named Father Francis Chisholm. Father Chisholm is a complete failure in the eyes of the world in his early years. A complete failure except in the eyes of a very wise old bishop who never gives up on him and who asked Father Chisholm to build a mission in a remote outpost of China. After many, many years of hardship and struggle and setbacks, Father Chisholm has established a thriving church and school. He returns to his native Scotland to live out his final years. And on the day of his sad departure, hundreds and hundreds of people whose love and respect he has won turn out for a final farewell. Joseph, his oldest Chinese friend who came to his aid when he had first arrived in China decades ago, has prepared a speech which he tries to recite from a scroll. He drops this scroll and stumbles, and then he says these words to Father Chisholm. How could I speak to you in words I had memorized like a parrot or a child? There is no one here who has not his own memories of you and your love and your goodness. Let them each speak in their own hearts for themselves. As for me, dear Father Francis, I cannot speak. I have no memories other than those of you. Jerry, I know that each person here has their own memories of you. If we could express the common thread that binds our collective memories, we might state 4 simple words, this time in the present tense. Dein Leben ist Gute. Your life is goodness. Thank you, my friend.
Jerry, I was afraid that this is going to turn into a very somber, serious occasion. I'm delighted that it did not. These people captured your personality beautifully. I can add only in a few words my own perspective. Our relationship was a bit different in the sense that I was here before you came, just a few years, but before. I have always considered you to be my younger brother, the younger brother I never had. My relationship to you was always the kind of older brother to younger brother. With you, I felt always 100% comfortable because I knew that whatever had to be done, whatever I asked you to do, you did. And I never have to give it a second thought. It's a very beautiful, unique relationship. Yet it was very much, I thought, and I do feel in my heart, a very close and very warm and very open and honest relationship. It's a memory that I will cherish, one of those unique, beautiful gifts that are given to a person once in a while in a lifetime. And for that, I thank you. You are a beautiful person. And I have one more request. One more. Please take good care of yourself so that you will regain your full mobility, what you had before you acquired that funny cane that you are using. Because your family needs you, everybody needs you, and you owe it to yourself. You have always given so far, and it is beautiful that you have done, that you have did that. Now it is time to take care of yourself and give to yourself. I love you. I salute you. Thank you.
Just come back on Wednesday so we can have lunch together. Mr. Kramer, will you please come to the stage for a few remarks?
This is the funny cane he's talking about. Well, I learned a lot about myself tonight that I didn't even know. First of all, I want to thank all the people who made this possible, and I'm not even sure who all that is. Margaret Kramer, Dr. Cron, all my colleagues who made this possible. It all started in 1968 when I had a phone call from the head of the chairman of the history department at St. Edward's University. And he called me on a hot July evening, and he said, do you have a job? And at that time, there was a glut of teachers, unlike now. Most of the classmates of my classmates decided not to go into teaching, even though we had prepared ourselves for that because there were no jobs. And he said, there's a little bitty boys' school in Fort Worth that I think might fit the bill for you. So I came up here and I interviewed, and it was the strangest little place I'd ever been. Over on Hemphill Street. But I liked all the people. They were wonderful, kind, warm. And 2 days later, they called me and said I had the job if I wanted it. I remember going home and telling my parents, well, it's a wonderful little school, and I'll probably stay there about 5 years. I might not have stayed that long if I'd have known that they were thinking about paying us in green stamps in those days. But it all worked out. And with Mr. Cellini at the helm and as my mentor, I knew we could never go wrong. It's been 39 years, wonderful years. If I had to do it over again, I wouldn't change a thing. I stayed here for a reason. And the reason is because I love the school. I've devoted my whole life to it. The people here have been wonderful, and the students have been fantastic, and my colleagues couldn't have been more supportive through all the years. And all the headmasters I've worked for have been wonderful and have been great mentors, and I thank all of them. So having said that, I don't know what else to say. They've said everything there is, so I will simply say thanks for coming. It is a real honor to see all of you here. When they told me they were going to do this, I said, "Are you crazy? Nobody's going to show up. It's just going to be us." And I was wrong. So anyway, thank you for coming. It's been just wonderful. And thank you for 39 years of happy memories. And Mr. Cellini, of course, has already made me promise that I will be around the school as soon as my hip is fixed, and that I will stay connected with the school, and I certainly plan to do that. And I've promised all the students, when I told them goodbye, that I will probably be hobbling around here about October to make sure the teachers are being nice to them. So they were all very happy with that. Again, thank you very much.